Well, hi, folks. It's February 2nd, 2021, and it's sunny, which means we have 6 more weeks of winter. Well. So today's topic is embodied energy. Before I cover that, I wanted to talk about just energy in general. If you've watched any of my other videos on the topic of gravity, then you know that I believe at the Big Bang, energy was injected into our plane of existence, and I suppose our plane of existence came into being at the Big Bang. The thing is that all of the energy that's in the universe arrived at the Big Bang, and there isn't any more. There isn't any new energy being generated. So in the case of our sun, it's just a giant entropy engine, and it's very, very slowly and very, very violently changing from a high energy state to a low energy state. High frequency to low frequency, or infrared, and then below that over millennia. One of the curious things to think about with regards to energy is it doesn't age. It changes its frequency, as I said, down to infrared and below, but it doesn't get old. And on the grand scheme of the entire universe, that means everything in the universe is exactly the same age. Us, Earth, the Sun, the rest of the universe. Now, on to the main topic, which is embodied energy. Before fossil fuels, most everybody intuitively understood what that term meant. Now, they didn't use that word, embodied, I don't think, but they had a visceral understanding of the amount of effort that was required to accomplish anything, because they had to do it manually, either physically directly themselves or with various beasts of burden, horses, ox, that sort. And if they wanted to do something really big, then they had to come up with things like very clever pulley systems and levers. So they wanted to build a building. They really knew how much energy it was going to require, and they couldn't ignore that. Now, a fossil fuel comes along, and we suddenly, and really that is, I think, an appropriate term, we've suddenly got billions of slaves to do our work for us. And it's so convenient and easy, we've really forgotten the energy path for accomplishing or building pretty much anything. So I'm recording on a cell phone, and the embodied energy of this cell phone is quite large. And let me take you through the path of that. In the simplest terms, it takes a bunch of energy to put the phone together. But of course, all the bits and pieces took a bunch of energy to make them. And what about the raw materials that make up those bits and pieces? Well, they had to be mined, and then they had to be processed. It gets a lot more complicated than that, though, because where this cell phone was assembled was a factory of some sort, and there was a whole bunch of energy that was required to build the factory, and not only build it, but maintain it. And then you have the employees, who all require energy to get to work. But then, where do you house them? Where does the food come from? How do they get to work? All of that requires energy. Same with all the equipment in the factory. That all had to be built at some other factory by other employees. And those machines required a whole bunch of raw materials. But it gets even more complicated than that, because you can't have dogs or cats or any other creature assembling a cell phone. You need humans, and those humans need an education all the way down the pathway. So you need an education to assemble the phone, you need an education to design and build the tools and the machinery and the buildings. You had to have an education to come up with the design for the cell phone. Now the components inside it. And then you have to have some continuity. So you need to educate the children of your employees if you want to stay in business any longer than 20 years. All of that requires energy. And all of that is represented or embodied in this cell phone. Now, for human terms, or at the human scale, we arbitrarily cut that determination off. Actually, when it comes to economics, a lot of those input costs aren't figured at all. They just don't count in their determinations. The raw materials are not factored in as an important component of the factory that makes the cell phone, or even the way the country supports and sustains all the people that work in the factories and the factories themselves. So we ignore almost all of the energy that's required to make the cell phone, which is fine. I mean, those considerations aren't particularly useful on a day-to-day basis for you and I. However, on a cosmological scale, or and what I mean by that, at least for me, whether I'm using the term properly or not, is thinking about the whole universe all at once. The energy that was required to make this cell phone, you can follow the path back along all of the different energy pathways, if you will, all the way back to the Big Bang, because there is no actual disconnection between the Big Bang and this moment right now. You could kind of visualize that in your in some of the photography now, the time lapse, long duration exposures of photographs of highways at night, and you see these long streaks of light, which represent all sorts of cars that go by, and you don't pick out the individual one, you just see the streaks as they go by. Well, that's us, that's everything. We have arbitrarily divided up our days and our moments into discrete points. Now, that's essential, and I believe all living beings or creatures or whatever must do that in order to make any sense out of the world around them. I guess another example, and I'm pointing this out because my thoughts on this and how I'm describing this isn't particularly unique. Marcel Duchamp did I think that's the correct artist, did a painting that a lot of you will probably recognize, and it's a nude descending a staircase. And it's a painting. It looks kind of confusing to a certain extent, but it's a still painting that's depicting a nude woman walking down the stairs, but it's a flow of figures going down the stairs. Now, in this case, in order to kind of describe what he's trying to get at, there's individual abstract figures that are clearly human proportioned at different points down the staircase. Otherwise, you'd just have a streak of paint from the top to the bottom. But it shows the continuous descent of the woman over time in a still picture. It's really quite a brilliant painting. I love it. So it's not like I'm the first person to think of this, but it really is important to understand, hold it in the back of your mind that all the energy that's at this moment is a direct connection to the very distant past. And you and I, are made up of all that energy directly from the Big Bang, and we're essentially the same age as the rest of the universe. It's a neat thing to think about.